It's now my honor to invite Samita Sinha to come up and share her latest exploration, which she will take you on.
So there's this single sound that comes from that machine. It's a little tabla box. And it needs to be a certain way, so I cover it with a blanket. And that's what that object is. And it reminds me a little bit of The Little Prince, where I think he draws a line and he says, "Is that an elephant?" Or, "What do you see?" Can't remember exactly. Okay. I smell her fingers. I hear them moving. Tingles. Effervesces. Opens. Sinks. Like falling. Feel her breath, warm. I see the tiny hairs on her leg. And the specks of dust in the light.
And now it's my honor to invite Jen Shyu to the stage to present the final work tonight.
Before all else, I must tell you, there are 5 stories in this moment. Just as there are 9 orifices of the body that can be grouped into 5. We have 1 mouth, 2 for the nose, 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 2 in the dark. On a dark road, under a silent moon, in a mess of metal, a puppet master and his wife and baby boy perish. The daughter survives without a scratch. And on that dark road, in the suspension of time, she meets 4 guides. A half-blind singing nomad of Hengchuan, a woman warrior of Weihali, and a shaman, the mother of all shamans. and you, showing her how to move on through all time. tomatea. Koya maya taya sahia paya kaya. Pupi 告诉我什么是爱，什么是情，因为我所经历过的世界，你未必能了解。I'm no longer able to recount in detail the story of my life. Now that it's twilight, and there is so much silence, all I can do is look toward the full white moon rising in the east. Light blue and pink horizon to the west. Jupiter and Venus gradually brightening. Mateo, from east to west, all you see in between that deep black sky is everything I wanted to tell you. Maya koya maya nan samo yemo kaya hiya hamane yen in samo yako hiya amor kaya mat hiya hoya amor kiye atibatik atibatik Atibatik, atibatik, feto atibatik. Si abafutu manula filamai, oh, bafutu manu si aloro lenba, balaka manu si aloro nakanba, atibatik. Soy ni akan 남산은 구이요 주산은 국이라 사도 강남은 싫어지요 안가는 간이요 갑사는 제자로다 여산이 도도요 hasamani lori loid unan lori loid balaka lakamanu sia una lori loid balakamanu sia Lana tene, bibili kubenai, bibili kubenai, bibili kubenai, bibili kubenai, bibili kubenai, bibili kubenai, bibili
from within the thick green camellia leaves. Vermilion flowers are blooming. Unexpectedly, I saw a tall white egret lifting its long neck, crossing with thin steps, lightly and elegantly. It walked toward its own slender shadow. Yesterday, the company of friends brought happiness. Today, I'm alone, but not lonely. I look toward the sky the egret flew into, an endless, deep blue expanse. Life has no boundaries when every place can be home.
Yesterday, the company of friends brought happiness. Today I am alone, but not lonely. I look toward the sky. The egret flew into that deep blue expanse. Life has no boundaries when every place can be home.
So another big hand. These was an amazing evening. One of the places that I'd like to start is this idea of encounters, and maybe I'll start with the fact that you encountered each other. And we all got together one evening a month and a half ago, maybe, and talked about being artists and where everyone was coming from, being women, being Asian American, being of a certain generation, being in New York, and being of the world, and what did that mean, and how did that create a space of encounters that was of this moment. So I just wondered if you could, I guess I'm a little complicated, but I always go there. I just want to hear, let me make it simpler. Let me start with the encounter that you have as artists, each one of you, and then maybe some rumination about hearing each other and some kind of a conversation that is amongst the three of you. Samita, you want to start?
Yes, she does.
I have nothing formulated to say, but I will say that it was a big surprise to meet your music. I've heard some of it I've heard your CD, but the power of experiencing your sound live was something I wasn't prepared for. And so that was an incredible encounter, actually. And yeah, just to have that be on the stage before I go on the stage was kind of exceptional for me. So, and then on the other side, I'm the middle child. On the other side, having someone whom I've known for at least, right? At least. I think it's longer. I've known Jen for maybe 12 years.
12 years, yeah.
13 years?
Oh,
yeah.
my
I start calculating it. And have seen her work, your work, grow and change and develop and over a decade and a half. So I was having these encounters of somebody brand new to me, pretty much, and somebody whose work I've been following for a long time, who I was seeing in this fullness. I'll start there.
Beautiful. Well, I've been following Susie since, you didn't know this, but 2000, remember you did SF Jazz with Marilyn Crispell? You did a double bill. Was it when I did a panel? It was a panel. There was a panel. Uh-oh.
Was this with Angela Davis?
Yeah. I was there ushering.
I did a panel with Angela Davis.
Yes. Yes, that was SF Jazz. That was 2001 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
I still lived in San Francisco.
Okay.
Yes. So I was really...
That's so fun you were there.
I was there. Cool. So that was mind-blowing to see Susie up there. And I thought, who is that? She lives in New York. That's another reason why I should go to New York. Geez. And Samita, we met through Sekou Sundiata, the late and great poet and mentor.
As did Bora Yoon, who I saw here.
Is she here?
Yes, she's here.
So yeah, we've had many marathon conversations and sleepovers. Well, one sleepover, but many more to come. So she's phenomenal, and it's wonderful to have these conversations, and so important with another, especially woman artist. And I really learned from Samita how to speak about work, though I'm still struggling. It's not easy. We were talking about this earlier.
That's funny.
But I feel like she's
You would learn that
so
from
well-spoken and eloquent about her process. And so sometimes I try and channel Samita when I'm trying to explain my stuff. But yeah, it's not easy.
So one of the things that is true to all of you is that you bring a variety of forms, of artistic forms that you have studied quite seriously, but not with the idea that you're necessarily going to use them as replications of a tradition, but that they add to the vocabulary, or they're like extended technique. I wondered if you could say something about that. And Susie, if we could start with you.
1 second, about extended technique? Or?
No, really about the fact that, for example, you're a jazz drummer, and you have studied indigenous, traditional song in the Philippines. So when I say extended technique,
Okay.
I mean it in a more metaphorical way.
Okay. Maybe I could put it into example for tonight's piece. For me, I feel it's, well, since you brought up jazz and indigenous music, it's both oral traditions, and particularly with Philippine kulintang music or different styles of indigenous music, there's improvisation in the composition, or even in Maguindanao styles, that is their composition when they formulate that in with their improvisation, each individual artist. So, and particularly those music, they're also percussive music, the ones that I studied and played. So we have those parallels. There's percussion, there's oral tradition, there's also improv within the composition. So it seemed kind of natural. And then also culturally, what I was exposed to and grew up with. And that was interesting when, Jen, I just want to remark when I was listening to you tonight, and I heard you, how many languages were you singing in?
Let's see. Javanese, Indonesian, a little Mandarin, and then English, of course, and then a little Korean, and then Tetun, which is from Timor. So 6.
Very cool. So
20 minutes!
Very cool. But it's also something very innate, like what we have when we're children and we're born, and how it feels like one language. We had a conversation outside earlier before sound check. That it could feel like one language, and I could hear that. I was like, oh, that's so beautiful that stayed with you. You know, even if it was stuff that you were born with or later you learned later, and it connected, that you speak it as one language. And as kids, that's what we do. A lot of times people kids can't learn to just speak fully one language because it's all one language if they're speaking or learning several languages. And I thought, oh, there's something very, very pure.
Totally.
That I relate to that. And I guess I find my way percussively that way with a lot of music and its extended languages that I play.
Beautiful.
So you've talked a lot about rhythm, and not necessarily algorithm.
Yeah.
As the vocabulary that you're playing with, but Samita, you're using a different set of vocabulary. Do you want to say something about that?
Sure. So my training is from Hindustani classical music, and I use it. I'll speak also about tonight because it's more specific. But I used it tonight, for example, as a way to, as materials to get inside of. So breaking the sounds apart into units that then can be entered and mined, excavated through the space, through the body, through whatever state or subject I'm exploring. So yeah, I take great liberties with the tradition.
Is it freeing? Is there a liberating sense to it?
That's a complicated question.
You were studying before in the dressing room, studying the
what
text.
What did you say?
I think you were studying the text, perhaps, in the dressing room before?
my own score, my own text.
Your own text for this piece,
Yes,
was it?
yes,
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
I see.
Yeah, it's liberating. I think it frees. For me, it's also kind of symbolic. When I feel like there are things that I'm trying to get at in that exist in culture and that are stuck. These little sounds give me a way to get in to that stuff, to that content, and try to move things around. So they become this terrain for work.
So it's almost as if the sounds, the choices that you have are as rich and evocative as language, as literal language, or as rhythm.
Yeah, I mean, I think of it as utterance. Really, like it's. I've peeled back tradition so far and then it went to the voice, and then it went to the body, and then it just got to, oh wow, here we are. Wow.
And Jen, for you?
Yes, I think I like the word you used, terrain. See, eloquence, Samita. But it is like a landscape, and I think, and I love also what Susie said about the innocence of the child, kind of going, a bilingual, trilingual child going between languages. It's like it's just all one thing. They're all beautiful, and then things specify themselves later in life. But there is sometimes, I've talked with a lot of mixed couples, and they say sometimes she'll just get stuck, like can't find the word, like breakdown in the system. But how beautiful, I've heard these kids speak so fluently in 2 or 3 languages at such a young age, and I think beyond languages are these traditions that certainly, it's more that I kind of work out how I might use them in the future through improvisation. So that's kind of because as I'm learning, depending on how long I've spent with each tradition, say if it's like currently I'm obsessed with pansori, and if it's still very fresh, so I still haven't created like X amount of compositions kind of directly inspired by it. I'm still in the process of performing the traditional way, but then when I'm improvising, that's when it comes in, and that's when I explore in a very organic way. And so I think that is the beauty about being an improviser, is that things pass through you and then are offered to whoever's listening in a very organic way, and that as a creator is kind of all that you want. So,
well, would you say that all 3 of you in some way or another use improvisation?
Definitely.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so I was struck by something that Susie had written about solid state to fluid. And I know you didn't mean it to be about identities, but I started looking at just some of the things that we had written back and forth to each other about the personal, the very personal that becomes public when you're making work, about fragility, about empathy, about sexuality, about internality, and realizing that within the way you are each taking, exploring the work that you're now involved with, that these ideas come out, and that identity is one part of that. And I'm just curious if there are ways that you, when you think about encounters, that is a part of the dynamic.
Mm.
I got lost in that question.
We went so many areas.
I know. All right. Identity as a woman creating work. What's it like?
There we go.
Thank you.
I was going to say it first. It's good. It's good.
Oh, wow.
Just slap me around.
Anyone?
But what did you mean by, solid and state and fluid state in terms of sound or
I'm
approach?
I'm studying fragility. So I'm studying it as an idea, as a feeling, as a state of being, as a way to frame things, and also mathematically what it means with glass, because I've also had an artist, David Horvitz, create this instrument for me out of glass. And that, originally he created it as a metaphor that I'm playing hourglasses, so that I'm playing time. But then I started to think about this. It's really beautiful.
It's beautiful.
About the delicacy and fragility. And then, so now I'm kind of studying fragilities in glass physics.
Yeah.
It's about measuring through temperature, that transition from solid to liquid. And I'm just learning that it's really like this kind of state of liquids, which they call viscosity, is just like polyrhythms. I mean, it's not just like, but for me as a drummer, I'm like, oh, it's polyrhythms. It's always polyrhythms for me.
Wow.
So I'm kind of looking at that. But how powerful it is. You know, we think we use these words, vulnerability or fragility, and today, I mean, my God, like every day we wake up, there's an enormous amount of things going on, and how they're framing it. And also this word is coming up a lot, so also to express what's going on. So I'm just thinking about it a lot. Yeah.
So internality and sexuality and I love the idea that especially as women, the idea that the sexual is something that's inherently internal. And thinking about that then as the power of the inside that relates to both sound and that, all of the visceral side that could mean. And I'm just wondering if you wanted to say a little bit about what that exploration is.
There's something about let's see, there's so many things to say. There's something for me about the internal experience of sound, or the internal motor for sound. What drives, what impels improvisation at any point, and how that is heard. That interface, that to me is a lot. It feels very erotic. It feels very akin to an erotic kind of exchange, and as a female, dealing with particular internal spaces that I know, it got me to link make this link between sound and sexuality that's been very potent for me for a very long time. And Daria Fine is here, and she kind of helped me discover some pathways physically and energetically that really helped me understand how deeply rooted in the energy body the voice is, in particular. I don't know if I answered any questions, but take it away.
Well, and one of the things that you said, Jen, is that you were trying to have an interaction and see the parallels that exist, and you are developing a piece that has 4 characters from Korea, Java, Taiwan, and Timor-Leste. And I'm just wondering how you see that. I mean, I think we saw a lot of that, but maybe you could say where you're sort of thinking of taking this piece.
Well, I kind of approach each performance as an experiment, and it's almost like every time I want to push myself to really for the potential to just fail. And that's, I think, through that performance, we were talking about performance as a sacred act. You really, there's a mystical thing in that whole thing, and I think anyone who's a performer has to have that courage, and so the piece, yeah, definitely. There was a finished version with a large ensemble, and I wanted to do this. I had just done a solo work, and 2 years ago with Garu Nugroho, this great Indonesian director, and I had taken that solo material and then did it a lot with different musicians with my band, and it's so nice, to be able to share that music, but then I felt I need to challenge myself and maybe go the other way, write something for the largest group that I've tried to write for, and then go backwards and try to do that as a solo. So that was the first experiment with electronics, which has always been a scary thing for me, because I worship so many electronic artists, but you have to jump in and start with one small thing, but I think the parallels. I mean, just what Susie was saying about that transformation from one state to another. One of the stories in what I did was this Javanese puppeteer, a friend of Samita and I's, who's passed away. They were all sleeping at the time of the car accident. And so I was just thinking again about that fine line between sleep and death, and what determines that. And then every day, like Susie said, we wake up and we see more news of another shooting or another tragic incident, and just trying to organize our place in all of this. And a good friend of mine, Nicole Mitchell, a flutist, she wrote a great post on Facebook, like, I feel like playing the flute is not enough, so how are we gonna get there to this place that we think that we know among our friends, but how are we going to get there? And that was a really relevant question, And so
what was the last sentence in your piece?
Life has no boundaries when every place can be home.
There's your answer.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Before I open it up to the audience, do you have any questions for each other?
That would take hours.
Before we go out drinking, that is?
It's like a longer. Yeah.
Well, let's open it up to the audience for a few questions. If you would raise your hand if you have a question for one of the artists or for
There's a big
all
hand
of them.
right there.
Yeah.
It's so bright.
Very bright.
I see a big hand there.
Okay, I have many questions. I was a bit overwhelmed, but as a physicist, I was very intrigued by Susie's comment about the glass phase transition. And
Don't question me too hard.
No, I won't push you. I'm
It's a
just
test.
sort of wondering how much this metaphor can be extended.
I'm actually testing equations.
Really?
How can you do it? How can you scale it? And what tonight? I can put subjective content in. So actually, I put intention tonight because I can share this now. But one of my dear friends and mentors, he passed on just this week, Danongang Kalanduyan, who's one of our great Philippine artists. So I put in actually some talking gong rhythms to this. I said, well, maybe I can put this subjective content in, and can it work in any content if I use this equation? I'm just curious. So tonight, that's what I put in. And I'm just working it out. I don't have all the answers.
What are polyrhythms?
Sorry? I'm sorry?
Use polyrhythms. You said
So polyrhythms, why I'm sorry, I'm like
It's bright.
totally blinded. why I was so curious about viscosity and how these neighboring particles are moving at different velocities. I said, well, this is like polyrhythms, because polyrhythms are about how do you play two contradicting rhythms together? At least two or more. So I was like, I'm just kind of fascinated. We can go back to language. What are we talking about? And looking, I like to see if I can, open myself up to look at things from different perspectives. I may not play any different music, but I might just think about it differently.
You should read about string theory. That'll
Okay.
Is there another question? Yes.
She's gonna.
Hi.
Identity.
I'm really intrigued about identity and how the individual identities, like plural, that you identify with have influenced your work, and how culture has influenced your work like a little further. I know that you spoke in different languages throughout the piece, and you played from different cultures, but just like your own personal experience and how that came out in your work.
Are you talking
To everyone.
You're talking to me.
But I was making eye contact. I'm sorry.
Samita. Yeah, you start.
Second time I've been volunteered. You said you're asking how does identity play into our work
Or culture.
or culture? How doesn't it? I mean, I think.
It's kind of hard to separate. I mean, I've never tried.
Yeah, it feels really organic, like the way that I make art, and the way I have to work with my self questions or cultural questions or aggravations about culture, dissatisfactions about culture, hopes.
Mm-hmm.
Hopes is a big driving thing. So I guess, yeah, it feels all like one big bundle.
Susie?
That's a big question. I think similarly that I feel that it really just is a part of me, but at one point I like to take what's learned or what is and just kind of throw it aside and then create and let it be what it is. And I think what's real and sincere will come through.
I think as a composer, I'm trying to kind of push the limits of kind of all my habits of creating. And so kind of drawing upon fieldwork, certain research, that's kind of one avenue I love, and there are many reasons for that. But then there is, again, when you are just improvising from nothing, and you are going deeper, still deeper into who you are, you'll find it's just everything's in you. You've lost nothing. Everything's been absorbed, and so whether I consciously or subconsciously am moving through the terrain, as Samita said, I can decide. Sometimes I can decide, and other times I would rather not decide, as Susie said, and just. But I think often, if I'm creating my own lyrics or my own songs, I do often try and just go to that anonymous place that pure place. But I mean, there's no way I could ever deny everything that's come in. Even if I tried, it'd be really difficult.
Although I guess I feel like I should be more forthcoming about some things in answer to that question. Like this content in particular, thinking about sexuality, is very culturally specific, and also pan-culturally specific, many culturally specifics. But I'm thinking about it. I think about it from the standpoint, I guess these multiple standpoints of being. I think about it from South Asia, and think about Islam and Hinduism, and think about the rapes that I read about, and I think about my family and the women and the men and all of the stuff. And I think about obsessions with marriage and my own identity, my own way of standing in relation to that. But I also think about what it is to come of age as a woman, as a sexual being in a place where you're a minority, and what the particularities of that. And so it's strongly in play. And I gave you a generic answer, and I sat here feeling guilty. So.
Well, I'm going to end this part of the evening. One thing, though, that I want to say is and this actually is apropos of that question as well. I think each of you has had commitments to technical traditions, and they're always also cultural, but that have a kind of, there's a deeper commitment to it than simply being surface. And I've seen, and I often think about what people say is commodification, where they sort of take, oh, well, that's a nice scale, I think I'll take that, and look at those gongs, let me try those. What's really struck me about your commitment as artists is that you have relationships with teachers, you have relationships with the material, and then, Jen, like you said, there is some way that when you are deeply involved with a form, that it becomes a part of who you are. And then it becomes something organic. Whether anyone outside can identify, oh, that was a rag, or that was, a Kulingtan rhythm, is not really relevant, because it's now become your language. And that, I think, it makes the kind of boundary pushing that I see you, and the new territory, the new terrain that you're exploring, really interesting. It's gritty. It's uncomfortable. We have to listen really hard. It's fragile. I mean, it's all those things that makes it really interesting. And part of that is because you're such serious artists. So I just want to thank you for the generosity of sharing. Thank you. And it's scary to share work that you are just starting to try out. And for all of you to be here, and so I thank all of you.
For a lot of illustrious people out there, I was like, oh God, I saw such an initial stage.
So
thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank all of you.